Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday evening lecture here at the Archives. We are putting together the lecture series for 2015, so we will be getting the word out there on our website, and we will be putting the word out there through various other media. We do have two upcoming lectures. Next week, Thursday at the same time, is West Virginia Rosie, the Realtor Program, A Model for America by Ann Montague. That'll be at 6 o'clock. And then the following Thursday, on November 20th, Firearms Throughout West Virginia's Early History by Jim Mitchell. That'll also be at 6 o'clock right here in the Archives Library. Tonight, author, journalist, and documentarian Eric Douglas will present West Virginia Voices of War, Oral Histories from West Virginia War Veterans. West Virginia Voices of War is a documentary weaving together the thoughts of 46 West Virginia war veterans on leaving for war and fighting to get back home afterward. The documentary includes veterans from World War II to Afghanistan. Eric will show excerpts from the documentary and discuss recording oral histories. Eric has a degree in journalism from Marshall University and a certificate in documentary arts from Duke University. He spent 15 months interviewing West Virginia war veterans, collecting 50 hours of oral history material that he used in the making of the documentary. He is the author of Common Valor, the companion book to this documentary. Eric also has written a series of adventure novels, children's books, and short stories. Please welcome Eric Douglas.
Thank you all. So he's told you all about me, so I don't need to explain who I am. I'm a local kid, grew up in Crosslands. Nitro High School, Marshall University, degree in journalism. Actually, my first job out of college was not working for Diane, but my first job out of college was running a weekly newspaper in Maitland, West Virginia. Imagine the culture shock moving from Crosslands and Marshall University to Maitland, West Virginia. That was a pretty eye-opening experience. But and then about 6 months later, I came up and worked here in Charleston for about 4 years. Freelance for a while. Actually spent quite a bit of time working as a journalist and photographer in the former Soviet Union. Spent about 6 months living in Russia. About 4 years ago, we did actually had an exhibit of some of my Russian work here at the Culture Center, which was very nice. We did it upstairs. But in '98, I moved away. I got a job opportunity and moved away from West Virginia. Literally just a job that doesn't exist in West Virginia. I was working for the recreational scuba diving industry. And that gave me an opportunity to travel all over the world and do some really cool stuff. I ended up in Durham, North Carolina. Lived about a mile away from the Duke University East Campus, and I stumbled into this, it's the Center for Documentary Studies. And they do a teaching program to teach people how to create documentaries. And that really kind of rekindled some ideas back from my journalism days and kind of got me going again. Flash forward a couple years, I was moving back to West Virginia. I came back in November of 2011, and I was kind of looking around for something to do. You know, I was writing. I'd already had a number of books, and I've got some of them up here. But I wanted to find a way to kind of get back into West Virginia, get back into the groove here in West Virginia, and start making connections here. And I stumbled across a story that said they were talking about the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress has this oral history project to bring in oral histories from war veterans of all eras. And I checked, and at the time, anyway, I haven't looked in a couple of years, so I don't know if this is still true, but the website for the West Virginia version of that hadn't been updated since like 2008. So obviously, nobody was paying attention to it. Nobody was pushing this project. And I called the director of the project at the Library of Congress, and he told me at the time there were only 20 West Virginia veterans oral histories in their collection. There's 200,000-ish West Virginia veterans, and so 20 is there's just no excuse for that, frankly. And so the light bulb came on, and I thought, this is something I can do. Now, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea what the end result for this project was. But I just thought, you know, I've got the skills, I've got the equipment, I've got the tools. I'm going to go ahead and start recording veterans' stories and see what comes of it. But just about the same time, my daughter's great-grandfather passed away. And I said it that way because he's their mother's grandfather, not my son's family. But it's Tony Serino. He's actually downstairs in the state library in the World War II section. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor. He was on the USS West Virginia when it was sunk. And unfortunately, he passed away just a few months before I started this project. And, you know, the whole family was going, you know, we really wish we got Tony to sit down and really tell the story, and he never would. He never talked about it. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a way to capture some of these memories. We were talking about it a few minutes ago. I've heard estimates that maybe more or less, somewhere upwards of 1,000 World War II veterans die every day. I mean, they're 90. They've lived a good full life, and they're dying away. But they're taking all these memories with them. So that's where this project started. Now, my plan for this evening, and since it's just us, you guys can tell me exactly what you want to do. My plan for this evening was to show probably about half the documentary. The project ended up being about 48 minutes of total runtime from beginning to end. There's 46 veterans interviewed, and as I started collecting interviews, I probably had half of them done. And I finally started figuring out the theme, figuring how this was going to work. Instead of all the World War II guys in one section, all the Korean War, you know, dividing it out like that, or even men or women or, you know, whatever, I saw consistent themes between talking about leaving for war, talking about the first time they saw combat, the first time they lost a buddy, communicating with home. A couple of them told some really funny stories. A couple of them stories that I could not air out. But you know, so there were a lot of consistent themes, whether you were in Afghanistan or whether you were in World War II. They all talked about effectively the same topics. And so that's how I divided this up. And it starts out just them talking about why they chose to go to war, especially the older guys. Many of them were drafted and told, you're going to be this, and you're going to the Navy, and you're going to go do this. Yes, sir, and they went off and did their job. So that's how the story got structured. So what I want to do is show you 3 or 4 clips out of this. It's 14 sections. If you're interested, well, 2 things. If you're interested in seeing the whole thing as a whole, next Tuesday, which is Veterans Day, I'm going to be showing the entire documentary at the South Charleston Public Library. 7 o'clock, I think. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's 7 o'clock. Also, the entire thing's on my website. You can watch it online if you want to. And fortunately for you, so you don't have to sit still for 48 minutes, each segment is broken out. No segment's more than 3 or 4 minutes long. Actually, there's one, I think 6, but other than that, they're all relatively short, so you can watch them and you don't have to kill yourself online. So if you want to go to my website, it's booksbyeric.com. You can watch the entire documentary that way too. So just to give you an idea of the flavor of this, let me go ahead and show you a few of these. This is actually the beginning piece.
Said I was done. I put in my time, lived my days of fighting out there on the line. So I laid down my gun and stumbled back home, but the place I remember.
10 o'clock in the morning till dark. Every 5 minutes, 3 suicides come over that mountain.
German counterattack that got about 4 of us. And we was medics, and they put us taking care of wounded. And then moving up the night, and I slipped out, got away from them. The 4th Armored Division, I know which way it was coming. It was coming to where I was at. So I wasn't gone too long. About 8 days.
And taking care of people who have been in combat and facing all kind of demons and fears and worries. And it was troubling, but we did the best we could.
When you first go over there, you have expectations of your soldiers about what would be like. And after you get into that situation and you experience it the first time, and then they give you the opportunity to come home and you see everything that we've had, and knowing that you have to leave your family again and leave, America behind again. It's 3 times tougher to say goodbye the second time.
West Virginia sends more of her sons and daughters to fight in the wars of this nation per capita than any other state. Honor, duty, and sacrifice aren't abstract concepts. They're simple truths. My name is Eric Douglas, and this is West Virginia Voices of the War. What follows are the experiences of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who fought to defend their country and fought harder to get back home. The most striking thing about these stories is the similarity in their experiences across wars, across branches of service, and across duty. So that was the intro. Just as a side note, the song you hear at the beginning is actually in the transition at the end too, is Staff Sergeant Jeff Ellis. He's actually a South Charleston City policeman now, but he's also a musician. He's played on that stage a couple times. A really good guy if you get a chance to hear him. His second or third album is called The Line, and the entire album was inspired by, he did 3 tours overseas, Kuwait and 2 in Iraq. And the entire album is inspired by his experiences serving in war, that sort of thing. And he very graciously allowed me to use that song at the beginning. While many West Virginians were drafted, many enlisted. They signed up because it was what they knew they were meant to do.
I was kind of a knucklehead growing up. I was always in trouble. My grades were never that great. I started working in a veterans organization. And it was just being there, listening to their stories and talking to them that really got me interested in military service. And then one day I went down and talked to a Marine recruiter. And I went and I took the test and everything, and I did fine, but I was 11 pounds underweight. And he told me, gain the weight to come back and be a Marine. And I did everything shy of eating BBs to try to gain this weight. And I finally did gain the weight, and I went back, and the Marine door was locked. And the Army recruiter said, hey, come on in here and have a seat. They'll be here eventually. You can wait. And next thing you know, I signed up for the United States Army and going to Fort Leonard, Missouri for basic training.
The boy I was engaged to was killed in May of '44. And I wanted to do something. So I joined the service.
I wanted to be a soldier. I wish I had a grander explanation of, some grandfather or somebody that influenced me, but no, it was never really a big thing in my family history.
So I graduated from, for the active duty Army Monday. Yeah, it was like get out of West Virginia ticket for a while. But once I did my 3 years, I realized when you grow up a little bit, you realize that is a home.
He gave me a bus ticket and just sent me to Fort Knox, and I was on my way for a career in the Army at age 16 months, or 16 years, 1 month, and 2 days. We were all an Navy family practice. My father, my grandfather, a couple of my uncles were all Navy. So I knew that was what I wanted to do. And so I enlisted as soon as I turned 18 in it was in May of 1966. And I didn't leave for boot camp until September.
Oh, I had always wanted to serve from when I was young. So after graduating from high school, I waited about a year and a half and then enlisted in 1975. As it was ending, correct, and it was not a popular time for people to enlist.
Now, one thing, kind of along the lines of collecting oral histories, one thing I made a conscious decision to do, I've done video work, but I really didn't want, especially for some of these older people, I didn't want to be shoving a video camera in their face. You know, people tend to get kind of uncomfortable when you video camera and making light and making. So I really made a conscious decision just to do audio recordings of these guys. I shot a still photograph of everyone and did oral histories because I wanted to be able, and I'll show you the equipment I use. Technology is amazing. This little thing, and this one's about 4 years old, but probably a little bit better and a little bit smaller. This is a Zoom audio recorder. I plugged a lapel mic into this, and this will record the highest quality possible of audio on something this small. It's a digital recorder. Yeah, this is a Zoom. This is the one we were talking about. There's another brand called a Tascam that sells these if you're interested in doing this kind of recording. That said, these stupid things. I mean, literally, you can get free apps for smartphones these days that'll do almost as good as something like this. And if you can plug an external microphone into it, this would work probably better than something like this anymore. But so that's what I did. I went into these guys' homes. We talked for a few minutes, and then I'd clip on the lapel mic and set the recorder out of the way, and then we just talked. Because I wanted to do my best to just disarm them, have them be comfortable, and tell me their stories, rather than, again, shoving technology in their face and making them uncomfortable. I think I got some pretty good stuff out of them. The one section is entitled War Stories, but I intentionally asked them questions, too, that were, I wasn't looking for, I charged up the hill with my, I wasn't looking for those kind of stories. I was looking for kind of the human experience of war more so than the blood and guts kind of thing.
When it came time to fight, they said goodbye to their friends and family in West Virginia and boarded planes and troop ships with their fellow soldiers.
That's probably the thing I remember most when I was getting on the airplane at Yager. My mom and dad were there, and I remember bringing the umbrella. And that's the first time I ever remember him crying. We hugged him when I was in Vietnam. He knew what war was. Well, it was scary because I guess Vietnam was the first war that's ever been on TV. And I remember, well, this is later, my dad was worried. He knew what war was.
When everybody, I don't know how many was there for, all my friends and family. But Dad waited all over and said goodbye. And that's when you could walk out the airplane. Where you could go. Dad came over, first time I'd ever seen him over tears was in his eyes because he was one that held his emotions back. And he didn't say nothing. He said, I love you, hugged me, turned around and walked off and looked back.
I will never forget when I stepped on the bottom step to the aircraft and I turned around and looked back. And they just look kind of small, standing there holding each other, and it just goes through your mind, this may be the last time I see them. Because you don't know if you're coming home in a body bag.
The ocean was very rough. There was two ships. When we went over in Drax, that was the 11th Drax that I was in that went over the bridge. And the waves were so high that I couldn't see from this ship that I was on to the other. And it was right beside us. I was sick all day. I got sick. I was sick 10 days out of 12.
I lived on peanuts and Coca-Cola.
Well, I thought, you know, going into war, but young, I was only 18 when we went into the war. And I thought, you know, back home, you just like playing Indian Cowboys in Broomsday Field. And it didn't take long to find out different.
And it's kind of like an athlete wanting to get out on the field. I've done all this training, and I thought it's going to go to waste if I don't get over there. And then once you get over there and the smell of war and all that, you say, wow, I probably would have done without it.
My wife was just distraught. She didn't, you know, she was a young mother, didn't know if I was going to come back. If I was going to come back wounded. If I was going to come back mentally sound. You know, how was she going to make it along?
Eugene Musk, I love that story. You know, talking about peanuts and Coca-Cola, that's how you lived for the crossing. Unfortunately, you know, sometimes when you sit and talk to somebody, you just bond with them in about 10 seconds, and I thought he was one of the coolest human beings I'd ever met. Unfortunately, he has since passed away as well. But, and it was funny, just in the kind of the journalistic ethics sort of thing. I was studying, talking to him, and he invited me to stay for lunch. His wife had dementia, and there was a caregiver there. And just to watch him at 90, 88, 89 years old, still caring for, still very much in love with his wife. And you know, and at one point I thought, God, I got to get my camera out. And I thought, nope, this is a private moment. Just let it go and you know, give them the respect. Just one of the neatest guys I've ever met, but unfortunately he's since passed away. So I'll actually let you guys tell me what you want to see. So from there we go to communication with family, war stories. I do want to play that one. There's some interesting stuff in there. Actually, they're a little out of order. And sort of different. Basic training, some fun stuff, but how about we do war stories? In general, when I took on this project, I really tried to avoid the heroes, the people who had a lot of personal recognition. I wanted just to get to the average guy or girl. Just as a side note, I really tried to get more women in this, but I only got 4 women who stepped up and said they wanted to be interviewed. So there's only 4 women in the whole thing. Just a quick story too. Myrna, you saw her, Myrna Baumgart. She mentioned she joined the Marines after the man she was engaged to was killed. The rest of that story is she ended up, because she had been in the habit, he was a pilot in the European theater, and shot down. She had been in the habit of writing every day to her fiance, and so she said, just give me his brother's contact information. She started writing to his brother. After the war, she ended up marrying his brother, and they were married for 50-some years. That was the picture she's holding. Is actually and he was serving in the Pacific Theater. He was in the Marine Corps as well, serving in the Pacific. But she ended up engaged to one and married the other brother. But it was fun. It was really interesting just hearing her talk. I mean, her wartime service was in Washington, D.C. She didn't go overseas, but she was there in the Marine Corps headquarters while they're planning the assaults in the Pacific and all that sort of thing. And she's writing daily to her then friend, brother of her fiance, who's in the Pacific Theater. It was a really interesting story. But as I said, I started out with just trying to get the average guy, although it was amazing how many of these people I talked to, and afterwards they'd say, or they would mention in passing something about having a Bronze Star or some other recognition, like, you did mention that at the beginning, you know, but it was just something that they, you know, they gave me one of those, and I was just doing my job. I don't know how many times I heard that. But in this segment, I got the opportunity to speak to Woody Williams, and I wasn't going to turn that one down. But he's actually a really interesting person.
Many soldiers served in combat positions, and
Because
many
he's
more
not all
felt
about the war stories.
regardless of their duty, everyone saw war. Often, these West Virginia soldiers stepped up and volunteered for it.
I have so little memory of that 4 hours that I spent knocking out and burning out 70. Some of it was 2 or 3 things that were just so vivid, I can almost recount the fact. And there are others, like, how did I get my strength? Nobody volunteered. I know that. But there are times that I can't remember. From about 10 o'clock in the morning till dark, every 5 minutes, 3 suicides over that mountain. And we got hit. So we had one coming on each starboard and port. We had one coming in this way. Then one come in over the bow. Well, we got the 2 coming in, port and starboard, but the one come in over the bow, the 5-inch gun jammed, had a piece of cloth and jammed, and it hit the mast. And everybody up there, that's where the captain is. To be effective, you have to be amongst the people. You can't lead back in the rear. You got to be there. If you want to change people's mindsets, you got to be where the people are. Because if you're not, that Taliban will. So if you're there, you can keep the Taliban away enough to be able to convince these people that we're here to help. You want to do positive things. I want to see your children be educated. I want to see you start your business and do something with it. Not have the Taliban come here and keep you under pressure. But let me tell you something. You know, when you're on Camp Victory, Baghdad, which is where the Al-Fa Palace is, and they know that that's where the headquarters is, let me tell you something. There's some rockets and mortars that come in there that absolutely wound and kill people all the time.
My outfit followed that. Wherever he went, we went. He would say, I'll have that airfield over there for you at 10 o'clock in the morning, which there's still fire down there. You can see the tanks of fire and everything right in the middle of the field. Most of the time, he did good. Sometimes we landed while they were bombing or they were shooting.
When we were getting ready to jump off for Charleston, they had to take this machine gun out of the way. So they sent out a half-hour before the road was usually a first lieutenant with a sergeant with him that carried a 300 radio. Really not big thing, that make a square that fit on his back. And the officer was trying to get the machine gun placement zeroed in, so he would stand up and he had a carbine, and he would stand up and fire, and then the Germans said, return the fire. And he just couldn't get zeroed in. And I said, well, I don't think you're going to scare him to death with that carbine. So I said, let me get up and get in where they can see me, and I'll run back and forth, and maybe you can get a better position on him. And so anyway, he finally made part of me, and he was able to get him zeroed in and get knocked out, and he said, I'll turn you for
Then we had flights into the smoke of the oil refinery.
that sticks in my head. We were flying into there, strapped into the aircraft, trying to let the pilot know when we get right off the ground, because you can't see, it's blind, where the wingtips are, whether he needs to go around or if he's okay to land.
When we landed on the beach, it was high tide, and the water was so deep, we couldn't get out in it. And we had to wait there in the open, and German fighter planes would come over at treetop level. You can't believe how close they come, just spraying bullets everywhere. And so we had to wait, and the tide went out. And we opened up the front of it, and we stepped out in the ocean and laid to shore.
In combat, a lot of guys, where guys get hit, they get hit in the shoulder, in the head, in the neck, in the thigh. Because you're laying flat in the dirt, and that's where the round hits you. You know, people, you just shot the butt. Well, yeah, because I'm laying on the ground, and that's what we're sticking up. You know, it wasn't shot in the butt because I was running away.
You know, you could be in maintenance, you could be in sheet metal, you could be in engines, prop loader, whatever it is. A lot of the guys that are flying over the regular, they get wore out, so a lot of people from maintenance and engine shops and prop loader, sheet metal, they volunteer to take their mission. That's how we do a lot of flying. We volunteer to fly.
I was a radio operator, just kind of commander radio operator. And then got boy, some of the guys that were on patrol every night. I didn't have to go. And I told the commander, they got every night on patrol, and I'm staying back there in the tent, where it's a little bit warmer. And I said, I'm going to leave. He said, now you know it's a dangerous thing to do. I said, well, I know that. But I said, I know better now. So, sometimes we make contact, sometimes we didn't. But I guess it wasn't my time to go, and I made it back.
I was sitting in my tube, and you know, they have the locals that sell those little DVDs. That I bought one of those. It was Boondock Saints 2, and I'm sitting there, and at the end of it, there's a shootout scene, and I had the headphones on because my roommate was working night shift and he was sleeping. And I'm thinking, gunfire is awfully loud, and you know, the sound quality just jumped up. And then I feel another one, and instantly our whole tube's shaking, and my battle buddy sets up and immediately grabs his gear, and he's like, "We're getting hit."
I know when I was down the ground, probably about 4 to 6 feet. We've been there a long time. And no shells hit. They raise you right up, you know. I went out the next day and measured 6 of my feet, and you could bury the truck in that hole before it hit.
We got overran one night, the Vietcong ran up and ran over a compound or broke into it, like blowed, tore that one over in Cambodia. Yeah, in Cambodia.
Every one of those, when I hear these guys, I remember their entire story. You know, it's for me, these are little proms. Just a couple quick stories. Dan O'Connor, he's a Vietnam veteran. He's missing the lower half of the leg. The ironic twist of that, he was severely wounded, and you'll hear that story in a minute. But severely wounded in Vietnam. So I think his entire military career was about 8 months. You know, Vietnam, they pushed him through, got him overseas, and then he got blown up and brought him home. But what he does, the irony of the story is he actually didn't lose his leg in the war. It was severely torn up, but then he actually lost his lower leg later in a motorcycle wreck the repeat damage to the same limb, they said, no, it's got to go this time. We can't save it now. But actually what he does, he's a good Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. He actually trains the Marine Corps Wounded Warrior team he actually rode bikes competitively, bicycles, not motorcycles. And so he actually teaches and he coaches the Marine Corps' Wounded Warrior recumbent bike team. And he travels all over the country training these guys. Now the guys coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. So he's still very much involved. I was telling one of the guys earlier the story of the gentleman there at the end, Rex Miller, who has also passed away. He lived on the west side, passed away just about 6 months or so ago. But he was very soft-spoken. The story he's talking about, he was in the Battle of the Bulge, Ardennes Forest, that whole mess. They were freezing to death in the woods, but he was very soft-spoken. And he just kind of he was obviously older. So I said, Rex, I'm struggling to hear you. I can barely hear you. And so I said, I'll tell you what, here's what I need to do. And I actually went down and I sat down on the floor right in front of him, basically at his feet, and listened to him tell me stories. And I thought, you know what, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be sitting, is at the feet of this very gentle, very quiet man telling you some really horrible stories about wartime. And that was actually, honestly, that was my impression. That's the anecdote for the whole project as far as I was concerned. I had the ability to interview and talk to these people, so I wanted to use that to capture these stories because they all needed to be captured. And even some of the younger guys. Ralph Walker, in this segment, no, he was. He's the one talking about hanging out the side of the C-130, so telling the pilot if they're close enough to the ground. He's literally talking about hanging out on the side of the C-130 because the smoke is so bad in Iraq. That was the Desert Storm. He talks in the longer version of his interview. He talks about he's been out in service a few years now. He's air guard up on the hill here, but how it still affects his life. And that was kind of the other story that every one of these people talked about, is the lingering, the residual effects of what it means to go to war. Almost every one of these guys that I interviewed told me if they could physically do it, and somebody asked them to, they would go back. Not for any love of war or guns or anything else, because their buddies were there. And actually, there's another one that I'll play that talks about that. Just as a quick side note, the book, every one of the guys I interviewed, it actually has the transcript of the entire documentary in here. Then I also put just 3 or 4 pages worth, but every one of the guys has a longer version of their story, so you can actually read more about them and find out what they went through and that sort of thing. So that's what became of the book, or how the book came together. So it's not a complete interview, it's not a complete transcript of the interview. Some of these guys, most of them were 45 minutes to an hour. A couple of them went 2.5 to 3 hours. So, and they're great stories, but there's no way I could put all that in the book. And that's what the book became. Is longer versions of their stories. More stories.
While family at home in West Virginia was important, these men and women connected with their fellow soldiers on a deeper level.
After my first tour, I understood. And it's not that anybody wants to go. Nobody wants to go. But those of us that feel that call to duty, you feel that's where you're supposed to be. If somebody else is there, well, I should be shoulder to shoulder with that guy. Even now, I've got guys, they're the whole platoon for my old unit downrange. I'd be there right there with them if I could, but I just didn't do it either.
You got guys that can take it.
lose limbs trying to get back over there. They make it to Germany to get fixed back up, and they say, hey, we're sending you back to the States, and they don't want to go back to the States. They want to go right back to Iraq. They want to go right back to Afghanistan. They want to go right back to where, I guess, the piece of them is that. They want to stay with their guys. It makes perfect sense to me because I've lived it, and I guess it is kind of hard for people that haven't done it to understand it.
When you're right there where you can die together and everything else, where you go through all that, and I think it's closer, it's different than anything else when you get in the service like that. Your life's on the line.
I said many times that very little about war that is good. There is one thing that very often comes out of war, and it happens to individuals who become so close to each other, so dependent upon each other, and so committed to each other that they're willing to give their life.
Just as a side note, that if you don't know Woody's the last remaining the last remaining Medal of Honor recipient from West Virginia. He's also the last remaining Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima. Really interesting guy, and his entire life he's dedicated to serving veterans. His big thing today, if you've not seen it, is he's building monuments across the country to Gold Star families. People who lost, Gold Star families are people who lost a loved one in war. And they actually dedicated the first one at the Donald Kennard Veterans Cemetery down in the Institute 6-9 months ago or so, and he's got 3 or 4 now, and he's building these. That's his project now. He just turned 90, 91? I think he's 91 now. I don't know that I can keep up with him, and I'm half his age, and he's an amazing guy. The painting behind him, though, is actually, somebody painted that after hearing his story. That's of him, his story, the short version of it, Battle of Iwo Jima, about day 3. He was in charge, he was a corporal, but he was in charge of 3 flamethrower units. And by the time day 3 arrived, all 6 of his men, there were 2 men on each team, all 6 of his men had been killed. And he tells the story, it's in the book, that the lieutenant, who's about the only officer left in charge of him, says, is there anything you can do? Because they've got these pillboxes all around this airfield. He said, I'll try. I mean, that's literally, he's just like, I'll do what I can. But he says, he ended up, by the end of the day, over about a 4-hour period, burned out 7 enemy pillboxes by himself. He said, the lieutenant gave him 4 Marines. He said, you 4 go with him, guard his back. 2 of them didn't make it home. 2 did. Two of them did not make it home. And he says every time, I've heard him speak a half dozen times now, every time he talks about it, he says, as far as he's concerned, he dedicates his Medal of Honor to the 2 that didn't make it home. He doesn't even know their names. They were all just mixed together, but he dedicates his award to all the Marines who didn't make it home off that rock. But he's a fascinating man, fascinating guy to talk to. Yeah, the painting behind him is an artist's depiction of what it looked like when he's burning up these pillboxes. He says, and he can tell some stories to minute detail, but then he says, I don't remember how I got my flamethrowers. He went through 4 flamethrowers. He doesn't remember going back to get fresh ones. He knows he got them, but he doesn't know how suddenly there was a new flamethrower on his back and he was going up, calling up after another enemy pillbox. So that's just kind of a fog of war thing. I'm just going to do 1 or 2 more, probably time. I actually want to talk just a minute though about, I'll show 1 or 2 more, but if anybody's interested in collecting oral histories, or especially veterans oral histories, Mr. Geiger back there, has, all of the stuff that I did, all the recordings that I made are part of the West Virginia Archive. I don't know if you're actively receiving them or what, you want to speak to that, Joe? Or?
We don't actively collect them because we don't have the expertise probably that you do, but,
Okay.
but we would be glad to work with anybody.
I mean, if somebody were to record them, you would accept them?
Absolutely,
Okay.
we'd be delighted to.
Okay. But also, and Kat, I think you mentioned to me that you had done a few of these yourself or
I've
something.
only done one. I did my great uncle,
Okay.
Chester's, and he was in the Navy in World War II, and he was in Nagasaki
Okay.
a month after it was and so I do have that recording, and I have the transcription, like house it something.
Sure. Well, Mr. Geiger can probably help you out. The other thing I would suggest is if you go onto the Library of Congress's website,
yes.
They have all the information you need. There's a couple forms that you're supposed to fill out. Is he still alive, or is he?
No, he just passed away earlier this year.
Okay. There are ways around. For every one of these, I had to have the veteran sign, and
I'm sure his daughter would.
Family can do it, that sort of thing. Yeah, there's some releases, that sort of thing, to include those in the archive. But and if you've never done an interview, if you want to do this kind of thing, but you've never actually interviewed somebody in your life, they actually have. And I use these questions too. I mean, I've certainly done interviews, but I use these questions myself because I wanted to have consistent recordings for every one of these that I did. So they have a list of about 10 questions on their website that they want you to ask every one of these kind of as a guideline. And I use those myself. So if you're interested in doing those kind of recordings, for veterans, I would certainly recommend donating to the Library of Congress, but also to the state archives as well. This one's kind of interesting.
Pain and death were part of the battle. Some soldiers came back with permanent injuries.
When it hit, it knocked me probably from here in the hall there, right against, flat against the tree. We called him Short Brown Charlie. And the piece of shrapnel went in the side of my foot here. It was probably about that big, and it was shaped like that into a point out here. And this was larger. And when it went inside of my foot, the sole of my shoe hit this part here and kept it from going clear through.
So I was on the road sweep on the left side of the road, leading the road sweep, and parking. And ended up parking from elimination on the little strip. So went out there and I was leading it out through there, and next thing I know, I'm flying through the air. I get what they call a bouncing bed, which took out the right leg. I didn't lose my leg yet. My leg was, this was severely damaged. Took out my head 14 through the right leg. Took my elbow out, part of my ear, and I got hit. And what saved my right arm was the pain because I had a slung. I had a slung up top of my shoulder, and the blast, the rifle took the blast, which blew it in half.
I had sat down to eat, and we had a radar system that picked up incoming rounds, but they had to hit a certain height for it to catch them. They didn't always catch them. But at that time, the alarm was off, and I had enough time to stand up and turn around, and the explosion hit. And I remember dirt flying in my face, and I passed out or was knocked out or whatever. Woke up, and they were screaming everywhere. I knew that there were several rifle attacks that occurred. I knew that. I could hear them screaming. At that time, I knew something was wrong with my leg. I didn't look at it. I think that was the right thing at the time because I was still outside, I had screamed 2 or 3 times for my guys and they didn't come out. And this kid not a kid, but he was a younger guy that worked with me. He was a sergeant, and then Sergeant Kelly. at the time. Me and him used to joke around a lot, and he stuck his head out the pool, and he looked at me. He thought I guess he thought that I was joking around with him, because I was always pulling pranks on him and stuff. And he's like, get up, man, quit playing. And I wasn't playing, but I could see the change in his face with the expression, with his scene, when he looked down my body and see my leg. And, he just turned ghost white.
How, you can't see it in that picture, obviously, since he's wearing jeans, he's missing, the leg that's forward is a prosthesis from actually just above the knee. He tells an interesting story at the end of it, that he's done extremely well. He actually talks about how when he first came home, and people be looking at him, and it made him really uncomfortable. A big truck comes up behind her, she'll literally pull off the road because she still gets nervous from those days. Without getting up on a soapbox, but I think that's the one great thing that the damage that we do to our soldiers that we send off to war, I don't think we take that into consideration a lot of times. These guys come home and they've got issues, and we're not prepared to handle a lot of that sort of thing. Where battlefield medicine has increased so well, that we've got all these guys coming home that would have died 20 years ago. But they're torn up and they're disabled, or they've got physical injuries that they're going to deal with for a long time. They're going to be stuck with for a long time. So. Anything else? Anybody else? Sir?
You mentioned that you had been a journalist down in Matewan. Did you hear any as far as oral histories or anything like that?
Unfortunately, I didn't really do much at that time. I wish I had. Matewan is such an amazing crossroads of history just to begin with. I stayed, I was living in one of the buildings that was the old Buzzkirk Hotel that they rehabbed and turned into apartments, that has bullet holes on the side of the buildings from the Matewan massacre and all of that. It's actually, just as a side note, a project for probably next year. I still have. I worked for this newspaper for 6 months, and we started it up. And I've forgotten his name right now. He was press secretary under Rockefeller, owned a newspaper in Welch, owned this paper. I can't remember his name. But he started this brand new newspaper, so I literally went in and started this brand new newspaper in Matewan. And so I have every issue of the first 6 months. So I want to go actually back to Matewan with my 6 months worth of weekly newspapers from this newspaper, from the Matewan Monitor, and see if anything's still there, see if I can recognize that sort of thing. I was actually there, quick story, was there when they were building the flood retaining wall, flood wall around the city. And this Corps of Engineers colonel came in and said, here's what we're going to put on the outside of your wall. And the people of the town said, we were actually thinking about designing a display ourselves so you tell a story of the history of the town. And the colonel said, no, here's what we're going to put on the side of the wall for you. So he left. The town mayor called Senator Byrd. The very next day, same colonel came back, hat in hand, saying, exactly what would you like to put on the outside of your wall? It was one of the greatest lessons in politics I'd ever seen in my entire life, wrapped up into...
And those were made by Art Forms, Ed Hillenbrand.
Oh, really?
In that company.
Mm-hmm. It was, yeah. Just an interesting time to be down there. All right, guys. If there's anybody else or nothing else, thank you all for coming in. Yeah, I do have the Common Valor 10 each. The other one, actually, these two are fiction, both West Virginia connection, and this is actually a friend of mine, breast cancer. She's actually, was the story of her going through breast cancer the second time in 2 years.